Hey everybody. Oh, Hey everybody, good afternoon. My name is Heather Stapleton. I am one of three community engagement coordinators for the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. It's not quite 2 o'clock, so I do want to give folks a chance to get on the webinar who have registered, but we've got about 3 minutes, so we're just gonna welcome you, get your plastic-free beverages ready, and we'll get started in about 3 minutes. Thanks for joining us. So we are right at 2 o'clock. I know that many of you are doing this in the middle of your workday, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you so much for being here. We had an awesome number of people register. Keep in mind that if for some reason you need to get going and you don't get to see as much of this presentation as you like, all of our webinars are recorded and online. They're on our YouTube channel. And occasionally we'll remind folks on social media about the availability of our What's Up in the Watershed webinars. So be sure and follow us on either Facebook or Instagram to get those notifications. But without further ado, I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Heather Stapleton. I'm one of three community engagement coordinators with the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program. And I was really inspired to start this presentation or I should say, by many people and just many things kind of coming together all at once. It's not really a lagoon focused presentation, but certainly the amount of plastic that we produce affects the watershed as well as the Indian River Lagoon. So I'm excited to be the first staff person to give our own webinar. We oftentimes invite guests for us, and that reminds me, if there are topics that you would like to see in the future, please either email me, my email address is on the screen there, or feel free to put it in the Q&A. The chat has been disabled. And at one point in the presentation, I would like for folks to sort of chime in without questions necessarily, just I'll ask you from some strategies that you've been doing that might work for you, and those might be new and different to other people. So I guess we're kind of using the Q&A in three different ways today. Give us any suggestions on future webinar topics. Give us your strategies that you've been able to be successful with, or maybe even some challenges that you've had in trying to reduce your own plastic use. And then finally, any questions about plastics in general or kind of what I've done. So, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so I do want to put a disclaimer in life. There's rarely any such thing as perfect, and I am not plastic free. In fact, many of the items that I assumed were plastic free turns out not really, because even all of the products that we buy in cans or sometimes even in cardboard, they're actually wrapped in plastic on the pallets. And if you've ever done any late night shopping when the stores are restocking their shelves, that's a huge reminder that pretty much every product that we buy has come in contact with some sort of plastic. So I am not plastic free. I think I probably used to erroneously use that phrase, plastic free, but I've made a real effort to stop using that phrase and instead just use the phrase plastic diet. Hmm. Okay. So many years ago, many communities started single stream recycling in an effort to increase recycling rates. Remember, we used to, or many of us anyway, used to have all of the bins and we had to separate the various bins and then walk them out to the street or the curb. As opposed to now, we have these lovely carts on wheels that can accept all of the materials that are accepted for recycling can go into that cart. Unfortunately, though, despite the fact that folks tried to make it easier on us to recycle, less is being recycled than ever before, especially when it comes to plastic. Globally, only about 9% of plastic does get recycled, and on the east coast of Florida, that number is even less. And so what happens to the rest of that plastic is that it's burned, buried, or becomes litter, unfortunately. In the US, plastic does make up about 18.5% of the total municipal solid waste in landfills. So the gist of it is we keep making and buying more plastic while recycling even less of it. So here's the recycling process, and I do understand that this diagram is not super easy to see. It's got small print, but I just want to show you how supposedly neat and tidy a MRF is. MRF stands for Material Recovery Facilities. Once the items reach the MRF is the place where it's like this huge Goldbergian contraption with magnets and conveyor belts and huge giant puffs of wind. And so it all gets into this system. Oh, optical sorters, laser sorters. This thing is very technically advanced. And there are humans that have to work in that, setting as well. And then once the MRF successfully recycles or excuse me, sorts through our single stream recycling, it gets baled up and they strive to reach the top bidder. So they want to sell these baled up materials when they are economically at their highest value. So many times baled up items to be recycled sit there in the bales while they kind of wait for the market to change. But recycling is very much based on what materials are currently being purchased and what is the economic value of those materials. But that diagram is very neat and orderly. So here's what I saw when I arrived at my local MRF, which is in St. Lucie County. So all of the recycling from Martin County, St. Lucie County, Indian River County, and the city of Palm Bay ends up at this MRF in St. Lucie County. It is a little bit older of a MRF. Brevard County recently just completely overhauled their MRF, and I'm going to get to see that one tomorrow. So unfortunately, that won't be part of this presentation, but this is what I saw at my local MRF. I arrive and there is stuff everywhere. There are all of these weird liquids pouring out from different bays and places, and the smells associated with all of these strange, quite frankly, gross materials. And then you go inside, kind of in the belly of the beast, and that's where I encountered just an overwhelming amount of stuff. So this MRF is a two-story facility with processing that takes place both on the floor as well as up high. So that's what all of those staircases and ladders lead to. This is my group tour from the top looking down onto primarily at that point, I think that was mostly paper. And in the background, you can see the bales of aluminum cans that I referenced. And these are those bales and how large those bales are in comparison to the height of a regular human, just so you can see those. And all of those bales are sold. And right now, unfortunately, both aluminum and plastic don't really have very high economic value. Certainly not as high as cardboard, because we have all started buying so many things online and there's so much more shipping than ever before in that regard. Cardboard is still the highest valued product. So I want to show you what happens inside the MRF. And if you have headphones on, I will warn you, this is intentionally loud. I blew poor KJ's eardrums out earlier, so she said, you better put a little discretion in there. But I left this sound as loud as it really is to show you that you can't even have a conversation once you get inside an operating MRF. You have to be right next to someone yelling. So fair warning. And things just run on for hours and hours on end. The MRF operates pretty much all day long, closes down in the evening, of course. And then outside and back behind the MRF, I was equally as disturbed to see these two scenes. Primarily items that aren't supposed to even be in the MRF, but lots and lots of litter back behind there. And then I want to show you this one. This was just an inordinate amount of shredded paper, which shredded paper is not supposed to go in the recycling bin. Shredded paper can be recycled, but not through the MRF. And that can be confusing for some folks in that some materials are recyclable using other systems, not necessarily just the MRF. And a big problem with all that litter blowing around the MRF is wish cycling. So wish cycling is someone wants something to be recyclable, so they put it into their cart, even if that item is not truly recyclable. Many times, people see the chasing arrows on their refuse and they think that that means it's recyclable. My friend Sue Flack down here in Indian River County says, don't even pay attention to those chasing arrows. Don't pay attention to those numbers because they just aren't really applicable to recycling. What they really do is inform you about what kind of plastic those numbers are. And so what happens when people throw in seemingly innocuous items like plastic shopping bags, it gets wrapped, those black bags get wrapped around all the cogs and wheels and things inside the machinery. And eventually the MRF has to be shut down. And I've seen people, not in person, but I've seen pictures and video of the employees having to like strap into basically climbing gear to get inside the MRF to remove all of the items that we have wished were recyclable. And even worse, I've seen very dangerous situations. One of the days that I went to the MRF, an electric paint sprayer had been received in the recycling bin. Lots of golf balls are being thrown into these recycling bins, and those can be extremely dangerous for the employees working in that really loud environment. It's also very hard to give other employees a heads up when something dangerous is occurring. It contaminates the recycling, not only making it harder to process, but sometimes even making our bales of materials worth less money if they have too many contaminants in there. So it's really important to educate yourself on your local recycling guidelines. And because Florida has so many seasonal residents, it's really important to distinguish what happens recycling when you are perhaps up north versus what happens for recycling in Florida, because every locality is slightly different. So really, I hope that today's webinar doesn't encourage you to necessarily try to increase your recycling rates, but rather I want to stick to that old-fashioned 3 R's hierarchy of reduce, reuse, and then recycle right. And why do we even care? Well, in Indian River County, we have about 500 tons of waste that's going to our landfill annually. About 80 tons of recycling does get recycled. However, 92 and a half tons of plastic that is created just as trash does not get recycled. It might not be recyclable, or it might be recyclable, but it doesn't actually get to where it needs to go. In Indian River County, about 53% of our landfill is food, and that is a really disheartening number because we still have food insecurity issues in our communities. And 1 in 4 children don't get enough food. And yet we are throwing away food that is perfectly edible. And so in Indian River County, there's actually a new-ish nonprofit called Treasure Coast Community Fridges. And I know there are other efforts elsewhere, but Treasure Coast Community Fridges works with grocery stores and some locally owned restaurants, as well as some chain restaurants, to try and recover food that's perfectly edible, but nobody purchased. It's the end of the day, and Panera has leftover bread that they're not going to sell the next day. Or sometimes, in cases, local restaurants even have meat products that are perfectly fine. It's the end of business day, they didn't sell them, and so Treasure Coast Community Fridges works with all volunteers. It's pretty much all volunteer run, and they'll actually go to these places, recover that food, and get them into refrigerators as soon as possible. And the great thing about Treasure Coast Community Fridges is it's all anonymous. So sometimes there can be shame associated with needing support. And so this is a way that nobody inquires as to why you're there. It's all community run. You show up, you take what you need, and you give what you can. So for the Indian River County landfill, our first cell closed long ago. Cell number 2 closed in December of this past year. That cell's life expectancy was 10 years. Unfortunately, that cell was filled after only 5.5 years. Cells 3 and 4, cell 3 obviously has opened, and cell 4 will need to open. And it is estimated that in Indian River County, our landfill, with all of its various cells, will likely close at the latest by 2060, perhaps even by 2050. And the same sorts of statistics can be found in Brevard County and its landfill. Now, the materials from Brevard County go to their own MRF, but they have the same kind of issues happening. And so they take over 1 million tons per year. Cell 1 opened in January. So the original landfill is closed at a height of 226 feet above sea level. In Florida, landfills are often the highest spot on the topography, as you can imagine. And so a new central disposal facility is now currently taking 1 million tons of trash per year. The first cell is expected to close by about mid-2028. And of course, constructing landfills costs a lot of money. Currently, that cell 1 is already 130 feet above sea level, so it's already about a little over half of what the original Brevard County landfill closed at. Cell 2 recently opened, also pretty expensive, cost of construction. And cell 3 will eventually be needed. It's not needed right now, but the opening of that cell is yet to be determined. And you can see all those associated costs. So dealing with trash and dealing with recycling is always pretty expensive. So why do we even care? Well, it's in the news a lot. We do know that plastic litter and microplastics are affecting birds and other animals as well as humans. So here's just some basics. Animals will accidentally ingest plastics. I saw a leatherback sea turtle that had a blue tarp sticking out both its mouth and its cloaca. It mistook that blue tarp as a piece of blue tarp, likely for a jellyfish. And so in that instance, obviously that animal died. That created this massive internal injuries and blockages. But a lot of times it's less obvious where plastics will start building up in the digestive system and it gives the animal a false sense of full. And so it won't even try to eat. It doesn't understand that it actually does need food, or the plastics will create blockages. So even though the animal is eating food, the nutrients aren't being absorbed through the system properly because it's blocked up. Obviously, animals can become entangled, especially in monofilament and things like that, but plastic waste in general can impair animals' abilities to move. Sometimes limbs will become amputated in nature just from the simple fact of something digging into the limb. Sometimes at a rehab facility, the rehabbers will have to decide to amputate a limb. It makes it really hard for them to move around, to feed, and escape predators. And every day, I feel like more and more information is coming out about the toxicity of microplastics. Specifically, the impacts to the lagoon, we well know that we have microplastics in the water column, in the sediment, as well as animals living in the Indian River Lagoon. And the effect oftentimes leads to physical harm and potential bioaccumulation of toxins as you go up the food chain. UCF is finding microplastics in oysters, and they estimate about 1 piece of plastic per liter of water. And more specifically, Orca, with their One Health fish monitoring program, has found microplastics in 71% of sampled fish from the Indian River Lagoon. It's not just the Indian River, it's the Indian River Lagoon and the St. Sebastian River, and I think maybe even the St. Lucie River, but 71% of fish stomachs do have microplastics and 60% of the tissue, so the part that we are eating. And of course, this is what becomes particularly disturbing is that microplastics have now been detected in pretty much every part of the body that you can imagine: blood, lungs, reproductive system. Brain is particularly concerning. The concentration in cadaver brains of microplastics has risen by about 50% just in 8 years alone. And just yesterday, I haven't even had a chance to really delve into the study yet. Somebody just sent me a new study of microplastics' effect on the brain and possible linkages to some pretty serious diseases: ALS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. Much of the effect of microplastics on brains is so new that we're just learning all the time. And unfortunately, that often means that we're learning bad news all of the time. Heart and arteries, stomachs, lymph nodes, kidneys, and livers, pretty much in all parts of our bodies. And so knowing that dealing with trash is very expensive, knowing that we're running out of landfill space, and knowing that microplastics affect the ecosystems as well as human health really got me motivated to try a plastic diet. So what worked for me? Well, I found like-minded people that were able to kind of encourage me on and share their ideas with me. I started very, very small. I think if we were to look back, I've actually, as many of you, I'm sure, I've been working on reducing plastics for a very long time. I started with plastic shopping bags, and now that's old hat and bringing reusable bags to the grocery store. It's not even a thing I have to remember anymore. In fact, when I leave the car, I often feel strange if I don't have a pile of recycling bag, or excuse me, reusable bags in my hand. And the big thing is just staying consistent. I didn't try to move on to a new substitution until I had really been able to stick with one of the substitutions. And then what really worked for me, I didn't used to really be big on social media, but I started sharing the successes that worked for me on social media. And I started sharing about, oh, here's some reading that I've been doing. What do you think about this? And for me, it really worked. And I felt like, oh, my Facebook page kind of has a purpose now because it became this amazing community where we were all talking about little ways, little things that we could do to reduce our plastic use. Um, and I found that not only do you have to be willing to talk about the changes that you're making with your friends or with your online friends, But even while I was shopping, if people would ask me, my biggest success was taking reusable containers to both the butcher and the deli. It was a process, but in the end, ultimately, those were successful changes I was able to make. And people were always asking me about my reusable containers. They were so curious, especially the cashiers. So another thing I did was stop doing self-checkout. If I had the time, I would do a cashier checkout. That way I could intentionally have a conversation about my reusable items. And it was not easy. Definitely, there were some big setbacks, and there are more challenges than most of us would like. Largely because in the United States, we don't have extended producer responsibility laws. So in the United States, the producers don't have any motivation, and you probably have heard many of the beverage companies have even started walking back changes that they were supposedly going to make because no laws hold producers responsible for the amount of plastic that they produce. So I really focus on single-use plastics. I still only focus on single-use plastics. So many times, if someone goes into my restroom, I'm like at home, I'm like, oh, I wonder what they're thinking about all the plastic products in there. It's very hard to find bath products that are not in plastic. I have found some. And so I don't try to focus on those things, but instead on the single-use stuff. So mostly food items is what I've been focusing on. And in doing that, taking reusable containers to the deli, the butcher, and coffee shops, I'm not going to say that it was painless. In fact, it was very awkward talking to multiple employees and managers at my local grocery store, delis, and butcher. You just kind of have to be willing to put yourself out there, and you have to be willing to be really overly polite about it. People don't might not understand what you're doing or why you're doing that. Um, and so it's the more flies with honey than vinegar approach on that one for sure. I am a sucker for fizzy beverages, I will admit. And once I realized that even my supposedly, beverages like LaCroix or like Spindrift or whatever, all of those are seemingly plastic free, but as I mentioned earlier, they're all shipped in pallets that are wrapped in plastic. So a big one for me was is to use my Soda Stream. I think there are other brands out there, but it's basically a system where you can just carbonate your own water. And the CO2 cartridges, I take mine to Best Buy and switch them out for refilled cartridges. And for me, those have worked really well. And now, not that I am plugging SodaStream above any other option, it's just the option that I use. Now you can even get SodaStream with glass bottles instead of plastic bottles if microplastics is a concern for you. Because every time we open and close the lids of plastic on plastic, you are creating a little bit of microplastics, pardon me, especially if you've had your Soda Stream for as long as I have. So I am definitely considering switching over to those glass bottles instead. Shopping at farmers markets and specialty counters is definitely a way to help reduce plastic for sure. For me, some big ones were powdered laundry detergent, shampoo bars, and conditioner bars. And I used to say, oh, shampoo bars, they must have improved so much over the years. Because I tried one about 15, 12 years ago and I absolutely hated it. And I must have just gotten really lucky. The very first shampoo bar I tried, again, in going into my plastic diet, was a brand that really worked for me. And so I was telling everybody, oh, they've improved so much. And then the next three brands that I tried were equally as terrible as what I remember from 15 years ago. So there was definitely some trial and error in there. And then just simple little things like cloth napkins, because now they're not, wrapped in plastic like paper napkins are. And I hate to admit this all the time, but I am addicted to straws. So even today, as I'm doing my webinar, I have a reusable metal straw. So that's a big one for me as well. And I have collapsible metal straw when I take it to restaurants or bars or things like that. And then I try to avoid prepackaged snack foods. This is where I need to work the most. Um, Most things like potato chips or things that are in bags, those bags are a compilation of three totally different kinds of plastics. There is one brand of snack food that makes chips that I know, Late July. They're not three different kinds of plastic layered together. Late July did have a recycling relationship with that brand called TerraCycle. I'm not so sure how well that is going. So ultimately, I mean, wouldn't it be great if we could just all make our own homemade potato chips and homemade tortilla chips? But, that's hard, time consuming, and I definitely understand that. And then I just had to be willing to try new products. Just, a lot of us get addicted to whatever our favorite things are. And so I just made a real effort to try new things. If somebody made suggestions for me, I would try something. Or if I wasn't convinced that it was truly plastic free, I would look up information about their recommendations. So in the Q&A, I'd love it if folks would go ahead and share some ideas of what has worked well for them. If you have anything that's particularly innovative or just a strategy that worked for you, I would love for folks to share those. Oh, yes. So Rockledge Gardens has a company that sets up there called Delivery Refillery. So Megan, thank you for that suggestion. Delivery Refillery shows up at Rockledge Gardens, and they show up, I think, at the Thrive local store, which just has recently um, moved. Oh, sorry. Not a helpful tip, but Sue Flack from Indian River County says 800 tons of trash and 80 tons of recycling are daily, not annually. So I will definitely fix that. Thank you so much for that answer. Does anybody have any other strategies they'd like to share? Cheryl says she uses wrapping mats for her sandwiches and snacks. Great idea. I love those wrapping mats. Or also you can get the beeswax ones. They're a little bit harder. You do have to obviously wash them and kind of renew them. And they do have a lifespan, the beeswax ones. I've tried them. They can be hard. The beeswax ones can be a little bit challenging because they're not airtight, but they're perfect for just, bringing a lunch or something like that. All right, we'll keep on keeping on here. Maybe. So I have plenty of room for improvement. As hard as I have tried, Sue likes to tease me about how many pounds of waste I still have every single day, even though I have tried my best. But my challenges are locally in Indian River County, there's no such thing as a delivery refillery or a zero waste shop. There is one zero waste shop down in Jupiter. And there are a couple zero waste shops that I've been finding in Brevard County, but they're not, well, let's put it, they have zero waste options, but they're not truly zero waste stores. Finding alternatives to some things can be really challenging. Trash bags, I still haven't found something that I'm super happy with. And for me, I have to use trash bags. I can't just put trash in a trash can because my trash cans are still manually dumped into the dump truck, the trash truck, as opposed to some, I know some are those automated systems. That's not what I have in the city of Vero Beach. Skincare is super challenging. I have found lots of products that are in glass, which is great. They usually have plastic caps, but at least it's a start. Dish soap, I have just not been able to get into the bar dish soap. To me, it leaves a strange coating on my dishes, so I'm still looking for that. Cleaning products, I have found that the tablets are much better than the sheets. Cleaning product sheets actually are assembled with polyvinyl alcohol, and there is some evidence that that's just contributing to the microplastics issue. Polyvinyl alcohol is basically plastic, and so that breaks down in our washing machines, and gets out into the environment. Plastic free can definitely be more expensive. I was just looking at eggs at Walmart last night, and there was a $1.50 difference. They were both organic eggs. One was packaged in paper, which is what I prefer to use. One set dozen eggs was in the plastic, but the plastic version was much cheaper, $1.50 cheaper. Trying to be plastic free and organic and gluten free is very hard. So if you have special dietary concerns, plastic free is almost impossible. And for me, for example, bulk bins just don't work because of potential cross contamination issues. And dairy is a big one. I have friends who have started making their own yogurts because just to reduce the amount of plastic. But obviously they're still purchasing milk in either the cardboard plastic lined containers or even in plastic jugs. But it is a way to reduce plastic. I have a really hard time remembering to tell the servers, no straws, no stirrers, please. I wish that it weren't there automatic to plunk in those straws and stirrers. I wish the automatic thing was just bring me a glass and then I'll let you know if I'd like a plastic straw or not. And greenwashing is rampant. If a company can pretend to be more environmentally friendly than they really are, they are going to stick to that. It's a phrase called greenwashing, and it can be really hard to spot. And I've been faked out twice. In the grocery store, you don't have enough time to look into articles right there on the spot. And so it can definitely be challenging. One of mine was hard. My favorite preferred brand um, of a powdered laundry detergent used to just come in a box. Literally, it was a very sturdy, well-made cardboard box. Well, that brand is now putting their powder in a plastic sachet, and that's really frustrating for me. And then another big one, online shopping and online shipping. It's really hard for you to know precisely how your items will be delivered to you. I have found that Thrive Market is a little bit better with their shipping. They use this interesting paper product for the majority of their shipping, but recently they've also been putting my glass items, in addition to wrapping them in that structured webbed paper, they've then been putting them in plastic bags. So that's a little frustrating for me. And then medicines, there actually are some brand new businesses where you can get prescriptions sent to you in refillable bottles, refillable, reusable bottles. I haven't delved into that. I know that it's an option, but those really small prescription bottles just go right through the machinery at the MRF. So even if the material that they're made out of is technically recyclable, the MRF in its current state can't really process those. I did just learn about a sunglass company that is recycling prescription pill bottles into frames for sunglasses. So that's pretty cool. And then a really big one for me, as big of an advocate as I can be for making change in my own practices, I have to admit, I am not the best at getting politically active and really getting motivated to help address those extended producer responsibility laws, like what they have in most of Europe. And the list goes on. I just show you this to I am well aware that I am not perfect, and I never will be. And so what I do is I just try my best to reduce as much plastic as I can. Occasionally, though, you are able to go the extra mile, and I found that each success and each time that I've been able to go the extra mile, I get excited. So, unfortunately, this soap brand is no longer available in this same packaging, but this was really exciting for a brief period of time. I could just take this same paper bag back to Publix, believe it or not, and refill that because they used to sell these bars of soap by weight. And so I wasn't creating any additional trash by purchasing this bar. Unfortunately, now the bar is coming pre-wrapped. It is in paper, but not as exciting. And obviously when you shop at farmers markets, much easier to avoid plastic. All of these items came from farmers markets. Little bit of plastic on those green onions, but for the most part, pretty good on the plastic here. And then I happen to have a friend who is a poultry farmer. And normally we would shrink wrap all of our chickens in plastic. That's even locally, that's what we did. So for Lent, the year that I initially started my true plastic diet, I asked my friend if I could just have my birds without any plastic. And she said, what do you mean? I said, I just want the naked birds. And so this was a big win for me. So I brought my birds home, dried them very, very well. Like obviously, when I left the farm, they were all packed in ice, which by the way, we do not buy bagged ice, plastic, excuse me, we don't buy ice pre-packaged in the big plastic bags. We go down to the fishing docks where they use potable water to make ice. So no plastic even associated with the ice, and then dried the birds really, really well, wrapped them in parchment paper for the most part, unless I knew I was going to put them in the freezer for multiple months. And in those instances, I wrapped in parchment paper and then again in aluminum foil. Unfortunately, locally, aluminum foil is not recyclable. I learned that the hard way. And so I'll try to figure out an even better way to do things next time, but I'll take this as a win for the time being. So, it's all about just making adjustments and prioritizing differently. A lot of times that means prioritizing how you use your time. We are all such busy people that it is hard to imagine, making all of your own snacks and things like that. So you just kind of have to think about how you want to use the time. I can't stress enough how much just recycling is not the answer. I've gotten lots of great comments from some articles that I've written and some Facebook posts that I've done, and people want to talk about how they're improving their recycling, which is great, but I'm advocating for taking it a step further than just recycling. Because it's obviously in our current situation, it is not the answer. We can do better at recycling for sure, and we need to recycle right, but we need to keep that hierarchy: reduce, reuse, recycle. And so for now, I'm focused on those first two R's of reducing and reusing. Talking it up, doing things like this makes me really accountable, because when I'm out in public, just imagine how embarrassing it might be if my entire grocery cart were full of plastic. I admit I'm not perfect, and my grocery cart some days has more plastic than other days, but talking about this so much has kept me very accountable. And I've been able to inspire others, and that just inspires me to do even better. Every time someone shares a little victory with me, that's a victory for me as well. And then yeah, we really do need to get better at advocating for that extended producer responsibility in the United States. So I think ultimately we need to remember that all of our choices matter. Our actions do make a difference. Your voice can inspire change. So at that point, that's pretty much my presentation, and I'm trying to find my Q&A button. Oh, right. It's hiding under the more.
Hey Heather, so
Yeah.
all the answered ones are comments about like alternatives of what you can do. So
Mhm.
we have everything from uh, the Rockledge Gardens reusable soap, wrap and mat for sandwiches and snacks, beeswax and reusable bowl covers. There's many different brands too. Um, Mesh bags for products instead of plastic bags when getting takeout. And I asked for no plastic silverware. The use of steel cups. Deliveryrefillery.com they gave a link for that.
Oh, awesome.
Um, so Megan recommended compostable trash bags, um, dryer
So
balls instead of
what let me just comment on the compostable trash bags. One thing is, just be careful. I have not delved into this, so I'm not advocating for or against that, but be careful with the materials that it's made from, and know that unfortunately in landfills, things don't really truly degrade. And so I wonder if I put my trash in a compostable trash bag, but it just ends up in a landfill covered up, with layers of trash and things, how much decomposition might really take place. I don't know the answer to that. And Megan did ask for me to go back to the microplastics in human health. So bear with me. I know this isn't going to be a pretty one, but I will try to get back here. Um, And KJ, you can keep talking while I go back to this.
No, there's just a lot of good comments. Swap produce from my garden with my neighbors who have eggs.
Oh, great idea. I love bartering.
Laundry sheets are good. TerraCycle is awesome too for recycling. Space Coast Farmers Market once a month gets a lot of her products from there. Bamboo cutlery and clean cult cleaning products.
Nice. Um, there's another question. Will we be able to get a copy of the study that was sent to me today? Um, I can't put that in the chat right now because I'm not quite sure where it is. But KJ, is there a way that we can get that link to the folks that are who are registered for today?
Yeah, I can add it as a link to the YouTube video if that works.
Okay. So I'll get that, I'll try to get that study out. Or if you bear with me, I might be able to, it's, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so that you don't see all of the craziness that my laptop is. But I'll get to that study. Hmm. Yes, here it is. This literally just came out yesterday. I haven't even had a chance to read through the whole thing myself. This was shared with me. So let me type an answer. Um, hmm. Where was that? Where did that question go?
It's under the answered.
Oh,
And you
answered
can.
questions.
Mhm.
Okay, so hopefully that worked. Under the answered questions, somebody asked, would we be able to get a copy of this study that was sent to you? So I just put that in there. Hopefully that's helpful. The other question, will you be doing this presentation again after you visit the Brevard Murph? Definitely. I think that the Brevard Murph, because it's so much newer, it's more energy efficient. I'll be very interested to see, compare and contrast the two. And I will at least update you, Kelly, if not update the entire presentation for sure. And then if anyone in Brevard County would like for me to give this presentation live, of course, that's the job of the community engagement coordinators. We all three of us give presentations throughout the Lagoon watershed, and we're happy to do them live in person as well. I don't know of any education seminars that occur in addition to this, but I do know that other nonprofit organizations are also giving webinars. There's an upcoming webinar on how to spot greenwashing that's being given by the Rainforest Alliance. I know that I have attended some zero waste webinars where they have invited guests that are actually owners or managers of zero waste shops. So I don't know of any off the top of my head other than the greenwashing one that's coming up. But once you start kind of get plugged into these things and start poking around, I think you'll be happy to find that there are a lot of resources out there. Again, I mean, I got to do this as part of my job. I understand how privileged that is to be able to spend time on something like this that benefits my health personally, but I also get to do it for work. So I understand that doing the research on your own time is not always easy. I found some compostable bags. I think it's called the Sunseed Co-op up in northern Brevard County. I found some for sale on the shelves. I've also found a lot of products at the fresh market as well as Sprouts. Um, so have those. Any tips for eating out or fast food? Fast food, I am not sure how to approach that issue. Eating out, I do have a container that I take with me, a reusable container that has a snap lid. It's actually a glass container, which makes me a little bit nervous. The containers that I take to the deli and the butcher are aluminum with plastic snap lids. So the top part is plastic. But for me, going to the butcher and the deli, I could just envision accidentally dropping my glass container in the middle of the grocery store and then ruining it for everybody. So I intentionally did buy some aluminum containers for the specific purpose of taking those to the butcher and the deli, but I guess I could start taking those to the restaurants. I don't know about takeout though, because I have found, restaurants and even coffee shops, they do need to adhere to health code, standards. And so many times, like at my local coffee shop, they don't want to take my reusable cup behind the counter. And I get that. They don't know how well I've cleaned my coffee cup. So what they do is they make my coffee in a reusable container and then they pour it into my reusable mug that has never gone behind the counter. I just set my mug on their counter and they pour it in there. So I get that for sure. Kevin, who's Sue's equivalent up in Brevard County, says that at 52 days, that layer of landfill trash goes anaerobic. So compostable items in most solid waste management landfills are greenwashed to a certain extent. I was worried about that. Yeah, I remember reading a study long ago before we were even talking about microplastics. This was like 15, 20 years ago. William Raffy, told us, described to us, he took a core sample of a landfill and he found a pastry that looked good enough to eat. He found a hot dog that looked good enough to eat. And he was able to determine the age of those food items by looking at a date on a newspaper that he could still read, paper even. He could still read the date perfectly. And I've forgotten the exact year, but it had been in there for multiple years. And you could still read the newspaper and you could still identify the pastry and you could still identify the hot dog. What is the name of the nonprofit that is addressing food waste in Indian River County? This is amazing. It's Treasure Coast Community Fridges. And the two women that started it actually work at our local landfill. So they certainly know how much food is being wasted at our landfill. And so, they're working really hard to try and recover at least a portion of that edible food that would have otherwise been thrown away. Again, nothing's ever perfect, but they're doing a great job. There was a very good article on landfills in National Geographic years ago, an archaeological dig on Staten Island. Yeah, right. So I saw that. I didn't see it in Nat Geo, but I saw it. William Raffy called himself a garbologist at the time. Shayla, I would be happy to try and develop what it is that you're looking for if this presentation didn't quite delve in deep enough, or if you would like this exact presentation done live somewhere. When I get to do this presentation live, I get to bring my show and tell with me, and I can show you all of those containers. I just set everything out on a big table. And Shayla, I would be glad if you would like to email me. I'd be glad to come and chat with you more. Now that my email is no longer in the on the screen, I'll put my email back in there really quickly and we can chat more. Oh, Megan says that Taste of India in Brevard County uses aluminum to go containers. So awesome. In down here, those aluminum to go containers are not recyclable. However, it is also not plastic. So I do think that even if you're using items that aren't recyclable, it's likely better than plastic, especially for your own health, putting hot food in plastic. And yes, our tour of the Brevard County MRF is tomorrow. So Cheryl, Kevin, Megan, I'll see you folks tomorrow and we'll see what's going on in your neck of the woods. So, Sue, I'll be sure and make that change before I give this presentation elsewhere. And thank you for that correction. And if anybody else has any input or needs to contact me, it's just my last name, Stapleton at irlcouncil.org. And I just want to thank everyone for putting in the time, energy, and effort to even be here today. This can be a lot, and maybe this is your first step to working on your plastic diet as well. Thank you so much for being with us. And again, let us know if you have any suggestions for future episodes of What's Up in the Watershed. Thanks, everybody.